Hello, guys. Hi. Thank you all so much for joining us. So good to see you. Hopefully, there's a few familiar faces here, and if I've not met you before, thank you so much for spending the next 30 minutes with us. So yeah, if you haven't met me before, my name's Nic. I'm the CEO here at Charle. We're a Shopify Plus agency based in London, and of course, I am joined with the wonderful Malte from Peec AI. So Malte, let me hand over to you, as I'm sure you can do your own introduction.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Malte. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Peec AI. Have spent the last 20 plus years working in SEO and started diving into AI search something like 2 years ago. And now I'm here.
Nice. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me, Malte. I'm really excited to pick your brains on what you guys are seeing at Peec AI. I know that we at Charle have been diving into this equally so much over the last couple of years. But just to kind of set the scene a little bit, if you've somehow found yourself here and you're like, I have no idea what these guys are talking about, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to be showing you exactly what's working in AI search for Shopify and e-commerce brands right now. But the main thing for me that I want to be able to give away today is actually giving away a bit of a stack of things that you can start implementing. Now, if you're kind of starting to like dip your toes into the world of GEO right now, the one thing I would say is SEO won you a ranking and GEO wins you a mention inside that AI answer. And I think that we're seeing even in our own business that actually buyers are increasingly using one synthesized answer instead of 10 blue links to really shape their decision making online. And I think GEO is really about that facilitation to their decision, and most certainly not chasing the clicks. So Malte, tell me, so obviously AI is like huge right now, it's all everybody's talking about. How big do you see in the lens that you see it, AI being right now for e-commerce, but also in general for driving traffic?
Yeah, so for driving traffic, it's of course still tiny, right? If you measure ChatGPT by outgoing clicks, it's not even on the level of Bing. It's like somewhere sitting with DuckDuckGo and Ecosia. But of course, we have to take into account that search engines traditionally show us 10 blue links that we can click on, and something like ChatGPT, Gemini gives us an answer and doesn't really have a clicky layout, right? There's often a brand mention without even a link. And recently, a couple of studies came out from SimilarWeb, for example, that these brand mentions, they actually drive traffic, but not directly and not attributable. Meaning people get a brand recommendation in ChatGPT and maybe a day later type that brand into Google or just type it in their Chrome address bar. If we look at prompt volume and try to compare it with search volume and only look at prompts that are like searches, then depending on which study we believe, the size of ChatGPT is like 4% to 20% of that what Google is. And why is there this discrepancy? Because there's no really good, clean data source. And there are, of course, many prompts that have nothing to do with searches, right? There are people that chat with ChatGPT, like with a friend. This has nothing to do with search. But there are also prompts that replace 5 searches. So how do you really measure this against each other? For e-commerce, the thing with the clicks is a little bit different than from almost any other industry. Actually, it's just e-commerce and local are probably the 2 industries that have their custom integrations with ChatGPT, for example, where you get a product slider or a map, and then you can actually click on things. So for transactional terms, transactional prompts, there's actually some level of click-through rate. What that exact number is, nobody knows because ChatGPT is keeping that a secret. But it's very obviously higher than the average 1% click-through rate that we are seeing in ChatGPT. And then if we look a little bit into the future, there are predictions from eMarketer, from McKinsey, that this will be $1 billion. I think from McKinsey, the prediction is even $1 trillion by 2030, like 3 to 5 trillion globally, driven by agentic commerce. As usual with these predictions, somebody who makes a prediction usually has to make a big one, otherwise nobody will talk about it. And I think there are industries within e-commerce where people just want to make decisions, and these will not be 100% agentic, but still probably agents are going to play a role. I was actually yesterday in a room with 200 marketers, and somebody asked, like, who has used ChatGPT for product information? Everybody raised their hand. And then who actually went through with the full purchase, and still like 20%, 20 people raised their hands, so like 10%. Of course, that's not representative because we're all online marketers, but things are happening. And maybe one number I have, this is from a Precis, an agency from Sweden. They estimate that users in Europe every month see 136 million product carousels in ChatGPT. And of course, we always have to keep in mind above every Google search, not every, but maybe 20%, maybe 50%, there's a Google AI overview, right? That is also a form of LLM answer. And of course, these are also existing in e-commerce, especially for the informational queries within e-commerce.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the fight for attribution tracking still continues. I think we might have thought we finally cracked it when we started to have server-side tracking, but here we go again into a world of unknown. But it's interesting actually, because even in our own data for Charle as a business, we've seen organic search traffic grow, we've seen AI traffic grow, but actually now AI when asking our potential new clients, well, how did you find us? Now AI search is now just as popular as our organic search, so it's really making a massive impact, and we're seeing similar trends across our merchant base as well. Now I want to get into the nitty-gritty of people that have tuned in today. Probably are like, right, shit, what do we actually need to do to catch up, or if you've already made a good start, what do we actually need to do to start driving this as a really substantial channel? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through around 21 top things that we can actually do, and I'll group them into 4 buckets. It might feel a bit shopping listy, but I think the first area that I think would be a good place to start is actually just getting your house in order. There's so much on LinkedIn, on X right now, of just like, oh, you need to do this, or oh my God, you need to do that. And it's like, it's just a lot of fear mongering. I don't know, what are you seeing? But for me, it's like, there's so much fear mongering. I'm like, you do realize that all of these tech firms have been built in a world when they have also understood how websites are built as well. But just to kind of start off then, in terms of kind of getting the house in order, schema obviously comes up absolutely loads. Everyone's like, you need to get schema. We live in a data world. That's all they can see. AI can't actually see your website. Malte, what are you guys seeing over at Peec in terms of the impact of schema?
Yeah, schema is a bit weird one, because I have now 2 completely contradicting statements, and then I will put them in context. So the first is, if you look at URLs being cited by ChatGPT and URLs ranking in Google, you will notice that URLs being cited by ChatGPT have schema more often. So by pure correlation, schema seems to be good. And this was also a very, very early insight, and this has been reproduced probably a dozen times by now by different players. But then if you actually test it, and if you ask an LLM to retrieve a URL and you put information only in the schema, it doesn't work. Like, some LLMs have literally 0% success rate in reading from schema. And this is in the grounding process, like specifically asking, get the information. And if you talk to people who have trained LLMs, everybody tells you, the first step is we clean all the HTML. It's just raw text that we give to the model. So how do these things work? What I believe is the following. If you have schema on your website, especially in e-commerce with products, price information, you get these much nicer snippets in Google search, right? Where you can already see your star ratings, your price. This, of course, helps you with Google ranking, because people are more likely to click, then you rank better. Easy. And when LLMs do grounding, they also use some kind of web search. Some use Google, some use Bing, some might use Exa, Tavili. There are a few other ones out there. to get their grounding information. And there, of course, the same effect might apply, right? If you already rank higher in Google, you are more likely to be picked as a document for grounding. And there is a lot of data that suggests that when an LLM, or actually it's an LLM-based answer engine, receives, let's say, 50 candidate documents for their grounding process, they don't retrieve every single one. They look at what they have, and what they have is the title, the SERP snippet, which is often based on the meta description, potentially a rich snippet based on structured data, especially in e-commerce, and the URL. And based on this, they need to decide from these maybe 60 documents that they get, which maybe 10 do they actually retrieve. So I think this is where schema can help a lot. And of course, for some websites, adding schema means adding the actual information that's in the schema, right? If you didn't have a rating before and then you add schema star ratings, you added net new content. You actually added very important content. Now, if you already had that content, you just annotated with schema, I don't think there is like an immediate LLM boost. But for any schema that Google or Bing understand to build rich snippets, there is surely an advantage. And often what happens is people have information cluttered throughout their text somewhere, and then the format of the schema forces them to write it very condensedly. So even if you strip all of the JSON, HTML code, everything away, and just leave the text that is in between, it is still very well structured. Mm-hmm. But it's not like LLMs have a ranking factor and they check, you have 3 different kinds of schema, you are better. Like that is an oversimplified explanation that many people had at the beginning. So I would just look at what schema do my competitors have that are often cited, and in general, what schema does help me with my SEO presence anyways, makes my snippet nicer, because that will also improve my chance to be picked by LLM as a source.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was reading online that literally schema is just read like plain text on a page. And actually, it's just like a really good opportunity for brands to say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we're about, which is probably not going to look particularly pretty if you put that as like the first line on a page. So I think it's definitely one to consider, that it's like, it's not a magic tool, but it's just an opportunity to be really direct with crawlers and so on. We actually we run quite a lot of research ourselves on our side now, based on what we're delivering, and across our Charle network, we actually saw, compared to 2 different stores, schema optimized product pages saw around about a 38% citation uplift versus those that didn't, which was really interesting. We had the unique opportunity of tracking before a deployment happened. So like you said, the data, you see the data all the time, but actually when you're trying to test it, this was one that was positive, but maybe just not quite as instant as updating schema and asking it to retrieve. Now, actually having a consideration around letting AI crawlers in. I know Shopify have done a lot on this recently with their universal commerce protocol. For all the Shopify brands that are listening as well, you'll see your agentic storefront now sitting within organic stores. Some stores are still saying coming soon. We've seen a lot of rollout over in the US now with direct data feeds. But Shopify have been pretty ahead of the curve on this one in terms of actually getting people ready. And it's been an opt-out, not an opt-in. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I can pretty much guarantee that you will have already opted in. But do have a look in your online sales. Now, in terms of misinformation across a page, I've seen quite a lot of information around, if you've got contradictory information within one page, i.e. your announcement bar says you've got free delivery, but your PDP says it's going to be £15, that LLMs get confused and just ignore. Have you come across anything like that, Malte, in any of your research in keeping your facts straight across the site?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just within one document. Even if you claim something on your product details page, like something super unique that your product supposedly can do, if there are no other websites on the internet, no reviews, comparison articles that actually support the statement, LLMs are also much less likely to believe it. And something that works very well right now is to write something in the footer of your website. because then it's on every page. So when you ask a question about yourself, the LLM will probably use multiple documents from your website and find, this multiple documents are saying it because it's in the footer. So yes, LLMs look for verifiable information, and verifiable for them usually means the same information is written in multiple documents. So if you have within one document even contradicting information, of course, that's the worst thing you can do. So if you have something unique like free delivery in July, please don't just write that once on your product details page, but also go to every page where it usually says delivery costs £15, strike that through and say free in July or free shipping in July, just to make that very, very clear. And ideally also do a press release or something that there are some documents out there on the internet. If the LLM tries to verify this claim, it can find that. It could also be a social post that mentions this, etc., etc. Make it easy for the LLM to understand and verify what you claim.
Yeah, and actually, we've done some of our own testing with Google AI overviews, and this moves me quite nicely in terms of creating content that AI is actually going to quote. And I think this is where a lot of brands are still getting it wrong in terms of their content strategy, in terms of, the old days was where we'd create very long articles. You see it on like food recipes. You land on the site and they're telling you the story of where they picked the onion before you actually finally get to the point where, how on earth do I cook this food I'm trying to make? But actually, one thing we found is we had one particular landing page that was really high value that AI overviews was beating, and we were getting like a snippet from a competitor. Now, we literally looked at what was in there, literally just above the fold of the page. What were the sentences? And we wrote our own version that was fairly similar. And instantly, literally within 5 days, we were then the cited source because we were newer, we were fresher, and we were very similar and direct. So that opening line, that initial description for like collection pages, that is absolutely vital in our experience, to be so direct with what is the page about, what are you selling, what are the key USPs of that particular collection. So because I think it's very unlikely that LLMs are going to be diving through huge pages to pick that key topic that's listed right at the bottom, for example. Now, in terms of topic coverage across a website or an e-commerce store, what's your guys' view at Peec on like how to cluster? So I know that in the Peec platform you've got the amazing topics tool, which really awesome. But is there kind of any top tips or any data that's really moving the needle in terms of like that clustered approach, Malte?
So for the clustered approach, I don't have a magic formula. I would say do something that makes sense for humans. For the content, I have some insights. So what you said is absolutely right. Like you need the statement above the fold, ideally, that is in itself perfectly citable by the LLM. And that usually means it's self-contained. So it doesn't reference any paragraph that is before or after it. You can take it out of content as it stands. It's usually written in a declarative, authoritative manner. So it doesn't say click-through rate of Google is maybe above 50%, but it says click-through rate on Google is 30% based on these sources. So it names sources, makes it easy to verify. It names the entities concretely. So it doesn't say something like, and for this reason, the second solution is the best for the discussed target audience. If you take that out of content, the information is zero, right? It specifically names the entities. And usually we are talking about something that is maybe 50 words in length, can be a little bit longer. And from research that we have conducted, when you use, for example, the deep research from ChatGPT, and deep research is like something that takes some time. Even that thing, it only retrieves 1,500 characters at a time from a document that is like 200-300 words. And then it decides if it actually retrieves more. So if all your first 1,500 characters is just nonsense boilerplate, or it's just your navigation or whatever, like your mega menu or your 10 latest marketing announcements, LLMs might miss your content.
Yeah.
And there's also research from Kevin Indig, who also found that it very likely is that the content from the first X 100 words is being cited, not from the bottom. Of course, they have to say that could be because people write a summary, usually on top, not on the bottom, and a summary or like a TLDR section, too long did not read, is usually what LLMs love to cite. So the research is flawed in that regard, I think, based on the underlying data. But yeah, put something on top. And very important, some LLMs first write the answer that they want to write, like AI overviews do that, and then they look for a source that confirms it. And that's why this effect that you described in the beginning works so well. For AI overviews, you just look what is the AI overview, you write a very similar statement, put it in a document that has all kinds of other trust signals, and then you are very, very likely to become the source.
Yeah, and the takeaway that I would actually just mention is actually also remembering your organic search strategy alongside this. Obviously, in the SEO world, we've just had a big May core update from Google, and in our research across our network, we looked at category pages that had 600 words or more. They'll typically be very long category pages or have quite a lot of descriptive content versus pages that are dropping 400 words or less. And actually 81% of cases that had the more words improved positions, whereas the smaller pages were dropping positions. So I think it's about even us as we employ our own SEO and GEO kind of balance in content. It's not forgetting that a lot of the world is mainly on Google still, and they're using Google to support, using AI to support their Google search. So actually, this is probably not a case of like, right, put everything at the top and just don't worry about the rest, because actually you could start seeing a real downward spiral from your own SEO content as well.
Yeah, I've seen two similar case studies recently. I forgot the names of the brands, unfortunately. One case was they used to have descriptions on the bottom of the category pages, like 500 words. I would say typical 10-year-old SEO content, like the sneaker was invented in the year 1960. Sneakers are shoes for walking on the street. Sneakers are often white, like that kind of crap. And they replaced this content with 1,500 words, mixture of human and LLM written, always human edited and reviewed. And they saw a massive increase just in Google rankings. And then there's a second case from West Wing. And they actually said they have the theory that the main function of the text on the bottom is to help Google and also, of course, OpenAI to understand what the page is really about. Because they have a case like they have a category page, towels. And then they have the filter towels over 1 square meter, towels for the bathroom, small bathroom towels. Of course, you have super overlapping products in these category pages. So there's a lot of duplicate content actually on the category level. And then having a unique text on the bottom that doesn't have to be very long, but very clearly encapsulated what this page is for seems to really, really help also with indexation and ranking in Google. And then, of course, in a second step, it should also help with citation, even though with the West Wing case study, when they published it, they only talked about Google, so I don't know the LLM effect of that, but I would assume that it also helped with that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And actually, the offsite game is also just as important as the onsite game. One thing I think people often forget is I've seen a couple of studies that are showing like 85% of brand mentions are coming from sources that aren't their own. So AI is relying on a source that isn't their own website to formulate its response. So actually we sit and talk about all of this on-site stuff, but a huge amount, and most citations probably are driven by pages. I know when we get recommended on AI, it's because of like top lists that have mentioned us and so on. And we've seen really similar case studies across some of our brands who are featured in like top PR lists and so on. Now, do you think AI is going to shift that focus and start pushing more brand authored kind of cited content, Malte, or do you think they're going to continue to be incredibly reliant on everybody else?
I think they're going to rely on everybody else, because if you think about it as a consumer, whom are you going to believe? Like, what is the best CRM? Do you want to hear that from Salesforce or HubSpot or Attio? Or do you want to have like an independent third-party review? And of course, there are some things like product attributes. Of course, the LLMs should go to the official source. But for like experiences, comparison of products, comparison of brands, they should use third-party content because it is what consumers would want. I believe what will be reduced in the next 1 or 2 years are these very manipulative content formats. I mean, there are a lot of fake tests out there of products, a lot of fake comparisons, where it's very obvious the person has never used the product. I know to us at Peec AI, it happens all the time that competitors create a comparison and then they use an LLM, and it's not even using our current pricing, and they compare their pricing versus our pricing from a year ago. Or they invent features that we don't even have and then say Peec AI has this feature and it's really good. We don't have that feature. And LLMs must get better at recognizing this. And of course, also on Reddit, there's sort of questionable content where a 3-week-old account asks a question, and then a 1-week-old account that already wrote 500 comments, 10 of which recommended brands, answers with a very long comment recommending a brand. Like this is working right now. It's influencing results of LLMs, but this is something where it has to improve and to get to more reliable and correct answers.
Yeah, and I think that's why actually having a really strong digital PR, even dare I say it, a backlink strategy to build authority around your own site, and even to be reaching out to really authoritative sources that's going to start talking about your brand is going to continue just to be as important as it has been with SEO, even though the world has managed to manipulate that pretty easily. Now, as I know that time is running short, I just wanted to kind of finish off this session and just talk around AI shopping. Obviously, we've got agentic services being pushed quite hard by Shopify directly. And of course, you guys have now released specific shopping tracking directly within Peec AI. I'd love just to finish off this session, Malte, and just hear your thoughts on how you vision shopping through AI to be, what you're seeing at the moment in terms of shopping being surfaced in results, just to wrap this up.
Yeah, sure. So how I envision it, honestly, no idea. If you asked me 5 years ago to predict 2026, I would have been very wrong. Yeah. So I don't want to go there too deeply. Maybe 1 or 2 small predictions. I'm very sure that there are topics where we will not have 100% agentic commerce. People want to make decisions, want to see options, want to feel in control, especially for emotional purchases. But there are things like, imagine you work at a company and you are tasked with ordering 500 screws of the type Copperhead 7, 9-inch, clockwise twisting, whatever. And there are like this long product names for certain types of screws. You probably only care that they are real and not fake, that they have good quality and that they are shipped on time. And then it's about the price. I'm very sure agents will negotiate this in the future. Like one agent buying, one agent selling, they will just align on something. I think humans will not be in the loop for these kinds of purchases. But for something like which t-shirt should I order, probably most people still want to be in charge, unless it's reordering the same thing again and again. That could also turn to be agentic. What we see right now is that for e-commerce prompts, especially ChatGPT is showing these product comparison tables or product sliders all the time with data that they are scraping from the organic Google Shopping. So whatever you put in your Google Merchant Center feed is super important for what is shown in Google Shopping. We researched this together with Tom Wells, an independent researcher in the AI search space, and we found very clear clues in the data that's transferred from ChatGPT.com to your browser. Like you can look at the streaming data. You can even find the keywords they are using to scrape Google Shopping, and a lot of other things. And there are also some clues in there how to optimize. So, for example, they run these specific shopping fan-out queries and they add terms. So, for example, when you have a prompt about a cozy, oversized hoodie, ChatGPT often adds the term premium cotton or structured. So these are terms, if they are true about your oversized cozy hoodie, you should add these terms on your product details page and on the feed that you give to Google Merchant Center, or also all of your product feeds, because clearly ChatGPT is looking for that. And then the other thing is when you get the product comparison table, you have some product attributes there like durability, comfort. This is clearly how ChatGPT is rating the products. So make sure you mention that about your own products, again, on your product details page, in your feed. And if you are a merchant and you are product and brand agnostic, have this information about as many products as possible to have a better chance to become the source.
Yeah, nice. Some great advice there, Malte. Thank you so much for spending the last 32 minutes talking all things GEO with me. I absolutely love the insights that you're giving on such huge amounts of data. And if you guys who are listening are interested in tracking prompts and shopping tracking directly within Peec, then do give Malte and his team a shout. The platform's absolutely awesome. It's what we use at Charle for all of our merchants. So a massive thank you for joining us today, guys. That is everything that we can give you for now. But if you have got any questions, feel free to follow up with us directly, and we'll be more than happy to follow up on email. But thanks for joining, and hopefully see you at the next one. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.